I hope everyone is having an awesome new year so far. Before we begin, the usual apologies. It's rather late over here. Yes, I'm recording this episode ahead of time just so that, it goes live when it's supposed to tomorrow morning. That's because I have a few things scheduled and I don't want to run the risk of not publishing anything tomorrow. Let's just say I want to start off a new year on a clean slate and not start falling behind recordings. So my oldest is having a bath, the youngest is already clean and is running all over the place, and then TV's on, and so you might be hearing some noise in the background. So if you hear some noise, that's what that's all about. I'll do my best to keep moving around, maintain a healthy distance and some nice quiet ambience for the recording. But if you do hear anything, that's what's going on in the background. Okay, and then I'd like to say thank you to Mark, a long-time listener of the podcast. Actually, the podcast recording where I spoke about how to deal with low ball offers was based on a conversation that I had with him. If you're interested in having a look at what his work is, you just check out the Camera Mark on Instagram. I think there's an underscore there somewhere, I can't remember, but you should just be looking for Camera Mark. In Nigeria, we have this thing where you say you're a cameraman or a camera woman. So it's not a cameraman, it's Camera Mark, M-A-R-K. And you see some of his stuff. He handles some of my portrait clients, so does really good work. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I made that podcast recording without his permission, even though it was based on an actual recording, an actual conversation that we had. I figured if I fudged things up a little bit, he probably wouldn't know, but even if he did, it would be fudged enough and he wouldn't know that he was the one. But he knew he was the one. He didn't think that there was a problem with that, and he actually appreciated the episode. So thank you very much, Mark, for letting me share some of the conversations that we have regarding sales, marketing, business, and other things, personal development. So, fair warning. If you do run into me in the future, I'm not just talking to Mark, I'm talking to any other listener of the podcast, and we happen to share some interesting conversations, past experiences, things like that. If I think it's going to be helpful for other listeners of the podcast, then I'm going to make a recording of it. So if it's something that you do not want to be shared, if you do run into me at some point in the future, mention that that is something that's supposed to be privy between both of us, and so you don't want it shared on the podcast, and I won't make any recordings of about that. So now that I know we're in the clear, I'm also going to share something else that was part of the conversation that went on. Well, you know how conversations are. You start off on one thing, and then after a while, the conversation drifts off into something and then something else. So this was the point in the conversation prior where Mark and I were with some other folks, another guy who is named Mark, who runs a learning center, and then another fellow, I can't remember his name, Festus, who assisted us on the shoot, and then we're having a conversation about the origins of the podcast. So I know that if you're a long-term listener, you've heard different ideas about how the podcast came about, conversation with my wife, and then also with my best friend in the business, Laura Michael Phillips of Posh and Pristine Events. And there were lots of people and lots of things that contributed to the birth of this podcast in different ways. And so one of them was interaction that I had on a photography group, because this fellow on the Learning Center was talking about how certain professions are not open to learning. Certain professions are not open to learning different things. Basically, there are some professions that are having the wrong conversations. And I had to share my own personal experience that I agree. And that's one reason why I'm not a member of photography groups anymore, because I think they just spend all their time having loads of the wrong conversations. And an example I gave was how a member of a group that I spoke about how he sold a portrait for, I can't remember the exact amount, but it was something insane. It was ridiculous. Well, for me, ridiculous at the time. He had sold a portrait for £7,000 or £10,000 or something like that. Sorry, not pounds, dollars. So $7,000 or $10,000, something like that. But basically, for young men who are trying to hustle, in Nigeria, I don't know what kind of industry you are involved in, so maybe $10,000 is nothing, but in Nigeria terms, by the time you run the conversions, it's not a bad haul. especially if, as a photographer, you didn't do it just once, you did it a couple of times. So the guy had shared the work, spoke about it, and I mentioned to Mark, the other Mark, and also Festus, and of course they found it really ludicrous. But once the guy, they found it ludicrous about what happened next. So the guy tells us about this deal, and then the next set of photos were, oh, that's a wonderful picture. What camera did you use? And then somebody else wanted to know about his compositing technique. And then another person wanted to know about his editing software. And some other person wanted to know about high pass, frequency, retouching, low pass, something, separation, all those technical stuff that photographers like. So this guy came on the group to tell us that, hey boys, I finally sold this thing. It went for $7,000, and people are asking about megapixels, high frequency pass, full frame, crop sensor, all those kinds of things. When the obvious question should have been, how did you get this connection? Did you sell to an individual or an institution? Was it an individual collector or was it a museum? How did you hook things up? This fellow who did the sale also was complaining about his hassles of dealing with the EFCC, because every single time the money hit his account, for young men of a certain age in Nigeria, everybody is being wary of anti-money laundering legislation. So, of course, you have where in different ages between, let's say, if I was to guess, I would say the youngest of us are probably like 22, 23, all the way up to 40. I know that Obi Nwokedi, he's a UK photographer. I invited him into the group. I suspect that Obi is older than me, so I don't know. If I was to guess, I'd say maybe Obi is 45. So, you could say in Nigerian terms, we're not expected to have that kind of money just hitting our account every day. So he always had hassles with the EFCC each time those thousands of dollars would hit his account. So I also thought that people would ask questions about, okay, how do you arrange payments? How do you how do you handle fulfillment? How do you send the things over? What else? All manner of questions, but instead we were having the wrong conversation. So like the other Mark pointed out, the one who runs the Learning Center, sometimes in our different professions, we're spending time asking ourselves the wrong questions and we're having the wrong conversations. So if you're a wedding planner and you're hanging out with someone and the person says, I was one of the planners who handled Dangote's daughter's wedding, and Otedola's son is getting married, we're going to handle that. And Donald Trump's baby boy is also getting married, we're going to handle that. And the president of France's daughter is getting married, and we're handling that planning. So if you're in one of those wedding planner forums or decor forums, the question you're supposed to ask is not, where are you importing the Italian chiffon from, or what kind of seating arrangement are you going to do, and stuff like that. The questions that you should ask are the business-centered and the sales-focused ones. How did you get how come you roll in those circles? How come you're chilling with Dangote and Otedola and the president of France and with Donald Trump? So how did you hook that up? How did you meet these people? How do you handle sales conversation? What kind of marketing did you do? Let's see, what else? I can't think of any questions right now because I'm just freestyling, but pretty much those are the sorts of questions that you should be asking. So I think those are the right kind of conversations that we need to be having in our professional groups, our WhatsApp groups, our Telegram groups, or wherever it is that we hang out on social media or over on the internet. So that's pretty much what I wanted to share today. Another conversation, some side chat, me and the boys are having while we're at the studio, getting ready for another shoot. And hopefully, as we're rolling into 2022, we're already in 2022 as at the time of this recording, let's make sure that we're having the right conversations, because that's what is really going to push the needle on our business. So if your boy comes and says, I was able to sell this thing for 100K, and you're a photographer, stop asking questions about what camera he used and whether he did high frequency separation or low pass detection or whatever it is. Ask him, how did you lay this up? How did you hook this up? How did you meet this guy? How did you handle this negotiation? What was your contracting process like? How did you do clearance? How did you do fulfillment? Those are the kind of questions that you should be asking. And it's the same thing whether you're a videographer or you're a wedding planner or a decor person. So that's it pretty much. So thanks again to Mark for letting me share the details of our conversations. If I have any interesting conversations with any of you gentle listeners in the future, I'll probably do the same. But if you don't want that to be the case, then mention it ahead of time, and I'll keep things absolutely confidential between both of us, and I won't share it to the other. How many downloads have we had so far? I think it's getting on 2007. So I'll keep it away from the 2007 other ears that we have over here. So thank you very much, guys, for listening to the Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry podcast. I'm your host, Abuja Sales Consultant and Event Media Professional, Tavishima Ayede. Thanks for your time and attention. I'll catch you guys on the next recording, and I hope that everyone is going to have a stellar 2022.